What's up, landlords? With this video, I want to go over, investing for real freedom and just cover some basics that you probably know, but I guess maybe it's kind of like a thought experiment. Let's see where I go with this. Hopefully, this is helpful. So, with investing, there's two different kind of asset classes that you probably know of: a hard asset and a paper asset. Hard assets are jewelry, gold bars, coins, a storefront, like a business, a rental property, of course. Paper assets are cash, Roth IRAs, 401ks, stocks, mutual funds, bonds, all that digital stuff nowadays, but still considered a paper asset class. And within each vessel, there's two different ways, strategies per se, that you can invest. One way is for income, and another way is for growth. Most of this paper stuff is for growth. So, for example, you buy stocks, you're pretty much hoping it's going to go up and you're going to sell it. So that's growth. You don't make any money until you sell. Same thing with mutual funds and, other retirement accounts and all that stuff. And even currencies. Some people buy other currencies, speculating against the dollar. And of course, let me say that I do know some of this, blends together. But for simplicity purposes, I'm just going to say hard assets, paper assets, and you can invest for income or growth. An example of a paper asset for income would be dividend stocks. They pay you on a regular basis. With the hard assets, it can do the same thing. You could do one of each. So let's say you buy gold bars and you're going to hold on to it for a while because in the future you perceive the value of gold going up, and that's investing for growth with a hard asset. But for rental properties specifically, we're investing for income and a business too. So yeah, we went over that. We got it, right? So when it comes to income and rental properties and investing for real freedom, when you have the forever difference mindset, this is some portraits, some ideas that come to mind for me. So I can just live off my rental income, like in a fish tank with fresh water always pouring in, right? I could ride my bike, cruise. Look, this guy's doing it with no hands. And then let's say this is inflation, this rucksack with a weight that you put in the back and you zip it up. I can ride my bike with inflation, put it on my back, I increase my rents, or I have to lower them depending on what inflation's doing, no problem. But when it comes to a lot of paper assets, investing for growth and stuff, this is what I visualize: a bunch of people hanging on for dear life, but I couldn't find a picture with like lava underneath or water. But like, some people can hold on longer and than others. But if you add this inflation rucksack on their back, it's gonna really make them struggle. It's gonna make things way harder. And I contribute this, I guess, picture the idea of when you invest for income and with inflation, it's kind of like a living in a fish in a fish tank, and then like one day you get to the point where you're gonna sell and you poke a hole in it, and now it's leaking out. So I know there's a lot of retirement calculators and stuff online where people try to calculate how long they're gonna live, what they think inflation's gonna be, how much do they want when they retire, how much they think they're going to need, how long do they think they're going to live at retirement. I mean, there's a lot of factors they're like, trying to take into consideration. And I think it's like a scarcity mindset because, if you are at the point where you're like, all right, I'm retiring and I'm selling stuff and I got this equation I'm sticking to and I'm going to sell off a certain amount. And it's kind of like the reverse of dollar cost averaging, like putting money in. It's kind of like they're pulling money out and not too much at a time, and the market could just tank and all this could go to zero, unlike like a rental property that just is not just going to disappear. You're going to have that physical hard asset. Well, anyways, back to this. It's like at some point you're going to know how much you have and you're going to be living and you're not going to want to spend too much, and I look at that as not real freedom because yeah, you could go on a vacation, you could afford it, but is that the best thing to do? Should I save my money? I don't know. I want to go to my, visit my kids, but I probably should save my money just in case or whatever. I just like the idea of, understanding, a hard asset, a paper asset, knowing the difference between investing for income and investing for growth, and understanding it's like a glorified savings account, a lot of the paper asset. I'm not trying to make fun of it. I know people are really good at this stuff, but I'm obviously biased. But it does give you food for thought when you consider it. And you don't want to be working when you're really old. When you go to retire, what happens if you miscalculate or some kind of black swan event happens like COVID or something? The same thing could be argued for, rental properties. But I endured the COVID. My rental properties, the majority of them are paid off. My tenants kept their job, thank God. And if they're paid off and I'm not like leveraged to the heels, I can maintain that. And if you're prepared and you have savings and stuff, you can weather that storm. If you plan accordingly, you take this serious, you know what I mean? So, I hope this is making sense and I'm not like all over the place, but this is fun for me this whole thought experiment and putting this together. Anyways, all right. So I got some scenarios, I guess, maybe thought-provoking ideas. Definitely more like a brainstorming session, nothing too serious. I'm just trying to talk high level strategies and just, you'll understand. So let's say you're a cash saver, you have 100K and each block, I don't know, maybe like 5-10 years of time pass. But with inflation, what happens to that $100,000? Some time passes. Now the buying power is kind of like 90K and there's 80K and 70. The longer you hold that cash, the weaker it is. And the inflation monster eats it all away, right? So let's say you're a stock trader, and I'm making this a good scenario. So let's say you start out in 100K portfolio, maybe it drops to 80, but it shoots up to 150, then it goes to 200, and over time, like what if you're going to retire right now and it's at 80K? Like that's pretty scary, knowing that you have no control what the stock market does, and you'll be like really hesitant. So let's keep on going. Let's say this is the point you want to retire, and your portfolio is 220K, and inflation still affects that, What 220K seems to us now, in the future, it's not going to seem that much. Homes used to be really cheap. Now people think they're expensive. They're going to be way more expensive in the future. I got this little picture here, get wrecked, to remind me, because trading is kind of dangerous. If you don't know what you're doing and you're using leverage trading, you could lose it all, honestly. It's scary. I would say day trading is probably the worst thing you do. A better strategy would be like to buy the stocks and hold it long term and keep putting it in, maybe like an index fund or something. But retirement investor, let's say somebody's more conservative and they want to contribute. They build up 100K. Each little square goes up 10%, and then you get to the point where you retire. It's a little bit safer. You're not going to lose it. I don't know what I was putting this triangle here for. Whatever, you get the idea. Now, let's say a home buyer. A home buyer buys a house, and they spend 100K, and they get no money in return, and then they go to sell it if it's in a good location, which I want to point out. When I look at these rental properties as castles, there's a lot of abandoned castles out in the wilderness, in the woods. So location is very important. And when you buy a regular house, and definitely rentals, I'm not somebody who's going to speculate on some market that is driven by an industry that may or may not be here in the future. I'm more concerned with the location of my rentals to last the longest, where people want to live now and most likely in the future, in good areas. I'm not taking a risk on some area that the government or the state is supposed to build up, and I'm not looking for those home runs. I'd rather hit like base hits and stuff, so location is very important. And I just want to point that out for investing in real estate. And also, like in this case, somebody buys a house and they go to sell it, they hopefully will be able to sell it for more. And not many people will hold their house for a really long time. And I put the fingers crossed them, because you never know. Your house could go down in value just like the stock market. And these mutual funds, even though I made it seem like it's going up, they could go down too, everything could. I'm trying to save my favorite for last, so I'm covering it up. Let's say you're a property investor, which I think most people in real estate investors are more like a property investor, which there's nothing wrong with that. We need that too, but I'm just using it as a thought experiment, thought-provoking stuff here, and trying to highlight my style a little bit by all the transitioning and contrast of stuff. So a property investor, maybe they get 100K, start out with 100K, they invest it in properties, their cash flow is low, and then they, at some point in the future, they do a refinance, cash out, they pull out cash, they reinvest it in more properties, more doors, and then their cash flow goes up a little bit. They do it again, refinance, cash out, invest it more, and they get more units over time. I just put this little guy carrying debt because I wanted to point out that debt burden is not to be taken lightly. I know a lot of people are always talking about mathematically. It makes more sense. It's called arbitrage, where you take out a loan with X interest rate. Let's make up something like 5%, and then you reinvest it. And let's say you think you can get 10%. You think, because there's no guarantees in investing. Then that difference, that 5% difference, is the arbitrage effect, where you're taking on a lot of debt, and you got more minimum and more buying power, so you can get more, and you're leveraging, you're using other people's money. Yeah, definitely start out with other people's money. What I'm trying to point out is don't be too greedy. And also, at some point, they're going to sell everything, most likely. Property investors are probably interested in an exit at some point, and then they're going to get to the same issue that these guys have, like inflation right here. Now they got a bunch of money. Now what do you do with it? Okay, are you going to put all your money in a tank, or let's say you put it in a savings account or cash, worst case scenario, and it just all your buying power goes down and gets eaten by the inflation monster? Or do you invest it in stocks? And then you got this up and down, and you never know. Possibly you could triple your money. Who knows? Or retirement. You try to find a safer vehicle, bonds maybe. But this is a lot of complexity. You probably want, as a landlord, you're probably going to need a team, and you can only be cheap so far and only carry so much leverage. And then some other things to consider with estate planning and liability. Some things you do to limit your liability will contradict your estate planning. And let's say you have rental properties in other states, and that state is going to have their own individual probate and laws for how to handle your estate if you pass away. An executor could be assigned to your estate in charge of liquidating your properties in whatever state laws this is. And even if you are married and your wife wants to keep that, she would have to approach the banks. I don't know if there's even fine print to avoid this stuff, but it gets complicated, and there's things that you may not have considered, where she would have to get qualified and see if she can maintain the properties, and if the mortgage company and the probate court and all that stuff and taxes that need to be paid, if that can all be sorted out. But let's say she's on the mortgage. When you go into agreement with the mortgage, that is an agreement for both of you being alive. If one of you are taken out of the equation and the wife is just left, she needs to also, it needs to be redone, and she needs to be qualified to be able to handle it on her own. And let's say you'd be like, oh, well, the mortgage company's not going to know if they just keep getting paid. Yeah, until you got to call in and handle business. How many times you call the bank and they're like, what's your name, what's your address, what's your passcode, and all? Do you have all the information where she could use it? Or what happens if they slip and say that you're not here, or not gone, you're gone, you passed away, and now you're flagged? Or let's say there's some AI algorithm in their database that starts flagging properties after they get to a certain age, and they want to reevaluate. You don't know. There's too many unknowns. There's no control in that. And then let's say the argument is like, oh, I'll get an LLC, and it'll be owned by an LLC. But a lot of these mortgages have a due on sale clause, like you're not allowed to change the ownership. And they're like, well, it goes back to the same argument. Well, how are they going to know? All right, are you going to put that much risk and burden? What if you have a family and kids that are going to depend on you, and you want to live or leave an inheritance for them? Do you want it to be wiped out? Do you want to leave this burden for all them? It can all be solved in your lifetime now. Just avoid all that. Have a better, this is my style, a more of a forever landlord perspective. I know it's going to be slow starting, but it's a delayed gratification, long-term perspective. You can do it. I wish I had more time and I could, have a back and forth with you guys and try to express my points even better, and hopefully, shine some light on this, and maybe you can consider it. But anyways, you start out with 100K. Let's say you are going to use some other people's money. You got to take out some loans, but the goal is to pay them off. So over time, you're paying these things down, and then you get them all paid off. Let's say you get 100K, you get to the point where you're making 100K a year, and that's a hedge against inflation. I got a little sign that says patience pays. It's a hedge against inflation. So this is something that I want to point out. You can increase the rents as the dollar loses its buying power. You can increase it accordingly. So let's say the scenario, compare it to dividend stocks. You got a paper asset, pays out a dividend. That dividend, however many shares you have, is not going to be a hedge against inflation. You can't say, hey, dividend people or stocks, I want to start increasing it because now the dollar's losing its power. No, you can't do that. But with a rental property, investing for income, you say, hey, tenant, I'm going to increase the rent because all the rents around here are going up and everything's getting more expensive. And I have this a system, and the rents increases X percent for a 1-year contract, or if you want to sign a 2-year lease, it'll increase for this. I got all that stuff built into my leases. And now you're getting more fresh water poured in, more life-sustaining cash flow to continue riding your bike with no hands. Put the inflation book bag on. I don't know. This is all very clear in my mind, and I'm definitely biased, but I hope it is like a thought experiment, kind of like I'd love to hear some of you guys' rebuttals. I know there's plenty of people in the stock market that would not like what I'm saying, and then there's plenty of real estate investors that would be happy to argue the logic behind arbitrage, and yeah, I get it. And the arbitrage is an amazing idea if it works. You could arbitrage into the wrong thing and lose it double, just like you can invest in the wrong thing with leverage and lose double, lose your shirt, get wrecked, right? I don't know. I think that's it. I don't have any action items on this. This is a little fun thing I wanted to throw together real quick. Please give me some feedback. Get involved in the community. Ask some questions, comment on other people's, share some stuff, like some stuff. I don't know. Just definitely do whatever we can to, get some momentum. I know I'm starting this all out. I really appreciate you guys for being here. Thank you so much. See you guys. Bye.